Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Need Some Introduction. I'm your host, Victor, and on this podcast, we're usually trying to introduce all of you to something new to watch, usually a TV show, usually week to week, sometimes movies, and usually with a co-host. Tonight, in this episode, it'll just be me breaking down this new season of The Bear, Season 4, but my co-host will be back. I'll be having a follow-up conversation with Sona regarding this current season of The Bear over this weekend. And Darren will be on the podcast in an episode I'll publish early next week discussing the new Apple TV thriller series, Smoke. I'm only halfway through the first episode of that show, but very intrigued. Also intrigued by the fact that the reviews have been very mixed. So very curious to see how the story progresses. And also, this very busy weekend, the final season of Squid Game has premiered as well. And there's been quite a different reaction from critics versus audience on this particular season, this officially final season of Squid Game, and maybe something we'll see in common with this season of The Bear as well. By the way, despite the fact that last year when season 3 of The Bear premiered, there was a lot of press about the fact that the fourth season, which had been shot at the same time, would be the final season of The Bear. And I have seen all 10 episodes of this current season of The Bear, and I'm pretty certain this is not the final season of The Bear. Maybe it won't officially be called The Bear, and I'll get into that during the breakdown. But it's almost certain that this is not the last time we've seen these characters in some form. Lastly, if you'd like to reach out to us, needssomeintroduction@gmail.com. Would love to hear everyone's reaction to Season 3 of The Bear, and definitely Season 4 if you finished it. Or if it's more convenient, post comments on YouTube or Spotify. If you'd like to support the show, give us a positive review or recommend us to your friends and family. The best way, the easiest way to promote the show is simply to keep recommending us to your friends and family. And of course, check out our back catalog of anything else you may be interested in checking out. Next week, I have some vacation time, so I'll probably be publishing yet another solo episode where I'll be running through some of the movie highlights now that we're past the midpoint of the year. So look forward to all of that. And with that all out of the way, let's get into Season 4 of The Bear. When The Bear premiered 3 summers ago, I don't think anyone expected the huge response that the show would generate. I've actually discussed it every season of the show here on the podcast in some form. So do check the back catalog if you're curious about my thoughts on those earlier seasons. Very briefly, I'm just more interested as we arrive here in this season, some of the remarkable aspects of this, that something that streaming shows have been incapable of doing, honestly, in the past few years. This idea of being able to actually deliver a season of TV every single year. This is the 4th summer and the 4th season of the show in that period of time. And the other thing that's pretty interesting about this as well is how the show is this really fascinating metaphor for its own creation and how personally people, their relationship with the show is, I should say. That there is some kind of personal affront when the restaurant and the show became something different. So I really want to get into that metaphor about the show, not only about being about a creative endeavor, not just a restaurant, but definitely the creation of a TV show itself and the family that forms around that, especially when you're in the 4th year of a show and you have to see these people on a regular basis and that they become this found family. But in the specific, when you're specific enough about your metaphor, it becomes universal, even though the show is very easily read as, on its face, a dysfunctional workplace, and the group dynamic required to take an individual person's vision, but how they don't own that vision until it is realized. And to realize that vision, they need the participation of others. So it needs to broaden, encompass everybody. But that, of course, is also the metaphor of family. And perhaps all these layers of metaphor of being a workplace dramedy, of being a family dramedy, about being an artist that is thwarted, never achieved what you thought the greatness you should have achieved. All those layered metaphors, of course, turn the show into a true phenomena. And depending on what kind of reading you have on the show, you might be disappointed in the trajectory that the direction the show went in. To wit, I find it very funny that just today, reviewing some of the negative reviews by critics and also by audiences about what they didn't like about season 3, was that there just wasn't any plot. It's all just character development. Sure, character development is fine, but where's the plot? As if season 1 of The Bear had much of a plot at all. It is a guy who has taken over his brother's sandwich shop after he killed himself, and all the complexity of that, and then meeting these characters through those interactions. And that was the beauty of it also. There was such a simple premise, but then the characters were so rich. So that when we get to the end of season 1 and the sandwich shop becomes the Bear, finally, the restaurant, the thing, the bigger thing that everybody wanted to achieve, it seemed like, how is the show going to be able to do that, to turn from a sandwich shop into this more high-end restaurant? And that is exactly what season 2 of The Bear was. Once again, about itself. How does it take this simple premise, this simple idea of just these characters in this situation with this ticking clock of keeping the restaurant, the sandwich shop, alive, and then how do they take it to the next level? And the whole season becomes about these actors who, some of these were just discoveries, some of these were actors had been around for a while, but finally getting a big break, stepping up, literally having bottle episodes in which those actors and the characters they're portraying are growing, are changing, are putting more responsibility, more expectations on themselves. And then the fear, can I achieve this higher threshold, this thing that I'm trying to achieve? And while I had issues with season 1, I understood the way it was designed and even the panic-inducing moments of it. And some of it was a little showy and a little self-indulgent, to be honest. But it all seemed to be absolutely intentional by the time it nailed its ending of that first season. So I was optimistic about season 2. And then, of course, season 2 is a work of genius, I think, almost across the board. And has all the same weaknesses that season 1 has, but has now weaponized and made them into this perfect concoction, as if maybe some of those elements, some of the more pretentious elements of the creators of the show didn't quite fit into a sandwich shop. But now you see the aspiration, you see the goals, and you see them achieving that in season 2. And then there was a turn. I was really surprised that even though I thought people would be mixed on season 3, I feel like even in retrospect, people have become more negative on season 3 as time has gone by. And you can hear my thoughts on multiple episodes of season 3, but I do want to just mention the fact that I have not changed my mind on the show like many critics apparently have. I still think season 3 was very strong. It was too long. I do agree with that. And anecdotally, it seems like the intention was to have a shorter, or I should say one final season 3 and 4, basically what is encompassed in these 2 seasons, to be in one season. And even though that doesn't make sense, it does seem like there's too much story now that we've seen these 2 seasons to have all fit into one. Although I could have easily seen season 3 fit into 6 episodes. So maybe the same number of seasons, but maybe fewer episodes. And I do, to finally transition into my thoughts on season 4, I again am really surprised to see this reaction where critics are saying this is a vast improvement over season 3. I'm not sure I agree with that, because I think, like season 3, there is a lot of contemplation. Some of it strengthens the show. Some of it does feel like it drags. But even this seems like a very intentional choice. So once again, I probably would not have minded seeing the first 3 episodes of this season to be just maybe one long episode. But overall, I did enjoy this season. But I'm not sure it is such a vast improvement over 3. And as a matter of fact, I think the highs of season 3 are definitely higher than the highs of season 4. That being said, this is all very designed. This is all very intentional. Whereas season 1 is about this sandwich shop aspiring to be this high-end restaurant, and season 2 is what it takes to up your game to achieve something great like that. Season 3 is about, to create something great, do you have to suffer? Do you have to make others suffer? It is a question not only of a restaurant or a business or any kind of creative endeavor, it's also the question of parenting. That was very much a season about parenting and all these different parental models. And you see the dynamics that Carmy, for example, this contentious relationship he had with his mother, and meanwhile, this absentee father. and how he is looking for a father figure. And we see over the course of that season the different models of the tough, abusive father who nonetheless perhaps he needed that to drive him to greatness. But then, of course, the more generous, open, and collaborative father figure as well. And of course, the extremely kind maternal figure of Chef Terry, played by Olivia Colman. And then we arrive in this particular season of television. And here we have Carmy. I mean, this is not a subtle show, by the way, everybody. We have Carmy trying to accept the fact that without the chaos, can he accept his success? Can he function without the chaos? He knows what he needs to do for the restaurant to be successful, changing the menu constantly in season 3, no matter how popular they were, was exhausting the staff and incredibly expensive since you can't save on your ingredients if you're always buying new ingredients on a daily basis. So what happens when you know what staples people hope to get? If you can have a favorite menu at your favorite restaurant, of course, that's why you show up. If you never know what you're going to get every time you show up, it's kind of hard to build that familiarity with your audience. And once again, let's think about this as a metaphor for the show itself. The show is changing every single year, changing the type of show that it is, and in some cases, alienating the audience itself. The people who showed up for the sandwich, they want the beef sandwich. That's why they're there. And that's why they turned up to check out what's the restaurant become now. And they're not getting their sandwiches anymore. And as a matter of fact, even if they liked the recipe the last time they were here, the menu, I should say, the menu has changed yet again. By the way, this was the critique of the restaurant at the finale of season 3. They were waiting for that review, and we know what that review was, and that it was ambitious but sloppy and uneven. That is maybe very intentional. That is the critical reaction to season 3 as well. By the way, the episode which, if you've binged this day 1 or day 2 even, I was watching this on my Hulu app, and the episodes were still 4.1, 4.2, did not have titles. Now the titles have popped up, so do go back and check them out. The first episode is called Groundhogs because, of course, it's all about Groundhog Day. That first episode begins with a few interesting touches. We first see Sydney having a dream. We don't know this until much later in the season, but apparently a recurring dream that she has of being surrounded by the snowfall. But we also see either a dream sequence or a remembrance of Carmy with Mikey asking him to open a restaurant together. We see that Mikey has once again tried some other business plan of his, and it hasn't worked out. And while they're making their sauce together, he says, why don't we open a restaurant? But what will they call it? Of course, we know the name they agreed upon. But of course, the reason the episode is called Groundhogs is when Carmy wakes up on the sofa, he happens to catch Groundhog's Day on cable. And that is the theme of this season of the show. How can you be happy with success? How can you accept the fact that you might have to compromise on your vision? You might need fewer ingredients, and you are making a better experience for the consumer, a better experience for your coworkers, a more stable work environment, a more stable and sustainable lifestyle for yourself. But when you're used to chaos all the time, can you accept the peace that comes with success? But it's not only about that. If you've ever had this kind of thing, I've had this experience myself where, to correlate it to what happened in the Bear Hair, I was a contractor at a company. I had no power at all, and I saw the way the project was being run, and I was very critical of it, but mostly to myself. I've mostly kept my ideas to myself, but I did mention this project could be more successful if it was run a different way. And then by chance, they fired the person who was running the project, and they promoted me into that role. So then I got to, it was a lot of work, it was very chaotic, but I got to execute on the ideas that I had. And then once you've achieved that success, you've deployed the new application, you now have to just maintain it. It's just a lot. The work used to be, how do I solve this problem? How do I solve this problem? And then all of a sudden it's just like, we need 2 people to monitor the system every day. And everything's just smoothly humming along. And can you make your day-to-day experience, when you're used to that chaotic, constant problem solving and improvising at every moment, can you make the mundane day-to-day still pleasurable and challenging in its own way? Or do you have to accept that maybe it won't be challenging, but it could be satisfying in other ways? Or you could just accept the fact that, hey, I've built something that works for these other people. And that could be enough. And that's what Carmi's wrestling with throughout the course of this season of show. And while that's his personal struggle, the peace and calm that's come to the rest of this team of people is pretty fascinating as well. Because Carmi, maybe because he is truly, as he says, trying to work on himself here, or maybe because he's just depressed and just saying, okay, whatever you say. Is he testing Sydney? Is he testing the independence of these people who he has trained very well? Perhaps that is part of it, but it's almost undeniable that there's some aspect of Carmi being really depressed, that he has lost this joy for this thing. And while he doesn't want to throw hurdles in his way unnecessarily, he is opting out more and more from a position leadership there at the restaurant. Meanwhile, even as he fades away from being central to the restaurant, everybody else blooms. It's almost certainly not unintentional that the collapse of Ever, Chef Terry's restaurant, and her accepting the fact that it's time for her to move on to something else, which maybe, as that was the conclusion of season 3, has planted a seed in Carmi's mind as well. But Ever's demise has also allowed the DNA of that restaurant to come into the Bear. So as those staff members come and join, it is the merging of the strengths of both of these different restaurant philosophies that lead to these efficiencies that basically, by the end of the season, have made the Bear sustainable, or almost sustainable. Once again, if the Groundhog Day thing wasn't subtle, you know what else is not subtle? If they need a ticking clock on each one of these seasons of like, we have a deadline, we have to open the Bear on this day. For season 1, they have to get the sandwich shop running successfully enough to be in the black. For season 2, we need to open the restaurant on a particular date. For season 3, we need to be the best restaurant in Chicago overnight. Completely artificial. That's Carmi doing that to himself, by the way. But we have a clock here, season 4. There's only so much money. This parachute, as they call it, is dissipating, and they have a certain number of months before it all goes down, and the clock is ticking down throughout the entirety of the 10 episodes. Of course, a couple other cliffhangers here left over from season 3. Sid feels like a second-class citizen in the Bear, despite the fact that Carmi keeps telling her that she is on equal footing with him, and continues to contemplate doing the smart thing, which is to go and become a chef with this character, Shapiro, at a well-funded restaurant, this beautiful open space, where she'd be able to help design it and be there from the beginning. And maybe he would be as bad a fit as far as a creative partner goes as Carmi has been, but it is the practical choice to make, and she's wrestling with it over the course of the entire season of television as well. Okay, so that's the end of the preamble for the most part. I haven't really spoiled anything up to this point, but I am going to start getting to specifics of the episodes and dig into each one of those episodes. So if you haven't watched yet, this is a good time to bow out if you're curious. As I mentioned, we see Carmi struggling with his ability or inability to succeed, but healing as well, this trauma from family. And of course, that's the other really big theme here, is the idea that, yes, family can damage us, as we see here, but then family as well can nurture us. This found family can help us heal ourselves when we find our tribe, when we find our passions, and that healing can actually return back to the family once again. So this has been a clear trajectory from the chaos and screaming and utterly toxic dynamics and competitiveness that we saw and self-sabotage in season 1, and how that has over time completely reversed itself, and how there are still demons to fight, mostly in ourselves, but this need to vilify and target each other has to end, and how that whole process is very healing and really, truly a beautiful sentiment here in this season of show. Just to wrap up episode 1, I've mostly covered most of the highlights here already, but very interesting. The use of music here, of course, a lot of music, the cues that we've seen in previous seasons returning here in this 4th season. And one of the music cues here, very entertainingly, once the Ever team shows up, despite the fact that there is this clock and there is too much money being spent on too many non-essential items, Richie has gone and hired the front of house staff from Ever. These are non-negotiables. And you see how they are able to start whipping the bear into shape. And speaking of that funny idea of like, what is life like in Groundhog Day and how Carmy sees that as a negative, we have this very interesting use of music once again. This show always very clever with its musical choices, playing the theme from Thief on the soundtrack as the team is learning to be more efficient, having their daily meetings, getting faster and faster at food prep, learning how to turn this artistic endeavor into a business, into a process. And the idea that the music is heist music, basically, is just a very entertaining detail. The idea of that very thing is, how do you turn the mundane, the daily routine of running a restaurant into a thriller? And that is the requirement to make this operation still thrilling, make the show still thrilling is the gambit it needs to clear. And of course, that also will lead to profitability. There is this clock that if they cannot bend the curve and stop bleeding cash, the buffer, the cash buffer, is running dry. Episode 2, and this is where audiences may feel this feels like filler, although I think it serves an important purpose. In a season that is very meditative, you need to have meditative moments. And the plot continues to develop, of course. The clock continues to tick. There is this need to have the food come out more quickly. Tina is the bottleneck in production. She does the pasta, and the pasta is just never done in 3 minutes. Honestly, that pasta's got to be pre-cooked if you're going to get it out in 3 minutes, just saying. But I'm sure that's part of the process. And Carmy begins this discovery, the self-discovery, and this acceptance of all the things he hasn't been doing, which part of that is not apologizing. Part of that is not having friends, real friends, outside of work. Part of that is that he hasn't even seen his niece yet, his newborn niece. And I guess it's up to your own analysis of this, or of Carmy himself, if he's slowing down because he has actually become depressed, or if this is a true understanding that he has not invested enough in other parts of his life. And this episode culminates with Richie drinking at a bar late at night, another late night, as anybody who works in a restaurant has to have many late nights, only to go home and we see him actually pray that the restaurant can stay afloat, because it's the only thing that keeps him attached to anything. This episode is called Soubise, which is a French bechamel-like sauce. I believe this is the sauce that Tina is trying to prep that pasta recipe with, but I could be wrong about that. And I don't know how difficult this sauce is to make. Bechamel can be pretty temperamental. The few times I've attempted to make it, it was a disaster. So maybe it has something to do with that as well. You have to be fast, but you have to be good. Or perhaps maybe it's just the fact that they're making something delicious out of simple ingredients, which of course, once again, is essential to make this business operational. Episode 3 is called Scallop. And of course, this is all about Sydney's perfect scallop dish. And once again, we see that Carmy looks at her. Again, the wheels are turning, and he sees that ambition, and he sees the skill that she has, and the passion, most importantly, the passion she has for the cooking. And I do believe when he tells her the dish is perfect, he's saying not only, for the first time, not criticizing her dish in any way, but maybe realizing that she, at this point, is better equipped to be that head chef than he is. Everyone's obsessed with potentially getting a star, which may be able to save a Michelin star, that is, to boost the reputation of the restaurant. But meanwhile, Richie has tried to up his game to try to carefully identify who that critic might be. And it turns out, not the Michelin star critic, but another critic happens to be there on a particular night where Richie has really pulled out all the stops to give this family a really special night. And this is a revelation that Richie makes at this point. It doesn't matter whether they're a critic or not. If we give everybody exceptional service, then of course the critic, by definition, will get exceptional service. And that delicious scallop doesn't hurt either. Episode 4 is called Worms, and this is Sydney's bottle episode. A lot of the episodes this season seem to spiritually reference other episodes we've seen previously in the season before. Of course, the scallops episode mirrors the episode in which Carmy rejects Sydney's recipe, telling her that it's good, but it's not good enough. You're not there yet. And how much of that is legitimate, how much of it is that tough love that he thinks he needs to push her to the next level. And of course, we've seen these bottle episodes before where these characters are off on their own, away from the restaurant, having formative experiences. And by the way, this episode called Worms is written by Ayo Edebiri and Lionel Boyce, two of the stars of the show, of course, and directed by Janixa Bravo, not directed by Christopher Storer, who directed almost the entire season and, of course, wrote the vast majority of the scripts as well. And in this episode, Sydney goes and hangs out with Chantel, played by Danielle Deadweiler, and while she's getting her braids done, she runs out of hair, which means that Sydney is uncomfortably stuck with her 10-year-old cousin. But as we saw all the way back in episode 1, where Carmi's talking to Mike, saying that restaurants are a place where people can heal and have a shared experience, and it's just a place for the community to gather, and how far removed he's gotten from that idea as he gets into this more esoteric world of Michelin stars and these expectations he's putting on himself to be one of the greats, and losing touch with the simpler joys of food and how it creates a bond between people. And here we have it expressed where Sydney has trouble bonding with this 10-year-old. She's very uncomfortable. She's having, as I can say, as a parent to a 10-year-old, they can be emotionally all over the place, sometimes still little kids and sometimes acting like teenagers. And of course, they bond over this shared experience of feeling like you might be on the outs with some of your friends group. In the case of TJ, it's because she's moved to a new school. And in the case of Sydney, it's because she's contemplating this other job offer. Does she want to go to the new school, or does she want to hang out with her friends at the old school? But all of this is in the context of her getting the ingredients to make her a chefed up version of Hamburger Helper. She can't believe that she's never had Hamburger Helper. And this is very sweet for a number of reasons. Just seeing Sydney, you always got the feeling that she probably was a little bit of an outsider, a little bit of a nerd, even in her community and the way she grew up, her passion for food, and how that became a lifeline, but in a way alienates her. Anybody who really gets into any type of creative endeavor very passionately, you immediately alienate yourself from the vast majority of people who don't understand what you're talking about. But here it is very much grounded just in having this conversation about Hamburger Helper, just these basic ingredients, very classic ingredients, a starch and a protein and some seasoning. And over the course of the preparation of this meal, she bonds with this cousin of hers. And of course, also weighing out this offer from Adam Shapiro. Episode 5 is called Replicants, a reference to Blade Runner. We actually see a Ridley Scott interview, I think, about Blade Runner. And I do wonder if the reference point here is to be an automaton. Have you become a replicant? Is that the fear that Carmi feels? I don't really know how to parse that title, but this episode itself starts off with a really powerful scene as within the AA meeting, or the Al-Anon meeting, actually, that we've seen Carmi attend multiple times, telling the story of how she fell out once again with her brother. And maybe Carmi sees some of the self-destructive behavior there and the trauma he's putting his family through at the restaurant, because he starts to concede that, yes, we can work with fewer ingredients. We could still make good food with simpler ingredients, and we could stick to a fixed menu. This really honestly shocks many people. But as we see multiple times over the course of this season, we start seeing that curve continue to bend. They are bleeding cash, still bleeding cash, but bleeding it more slowly. Episode 6 is called Sophie, and of course, this is where Carmi finally meets baby Sophie. So many beautiful moments here in this episode between just seeing Carmi smile genuinely with this baby, the actor himself, but you just forget how infrequently we get to see him just have a broad smile on his face. And maybe once again, realizing the parts of his life that he's not fully developed. And one of those things, of course, is also his relationship with Claire. He finally showed up in the middle of the night, had to go see her, finally, reflecting or mirroring the scenes where he refused to call her last season, for example. But it's not so easy. She's still hurt by the way things went. There's a lot of talking. I don't know if this scene would actually play out this way, to be totally honest with you. I was saying that to my wife, that actually the way this would play out is that They would probably just accept each other's apologies, but these people do love to talk a lot. And she would be very wary and then go on a date. And then over time, maybe start to trust him again. And that is kind of the scene we finally get a couple episodes later. But back to the Sophie episode, his realization that he's missed out on family, something so basic, seeing his niece finally. And just another really beautiful scene here that really made me think about when I first had my daughter, when she was born. This great scene where we see Sugar and her husband and the baby all in bed together. And she says, it's so calm. The baby's not crying, obviously. Everything's so peaceful. I wish it could always be this way. And he asks, really? Do you want that? And it is a question we all ask ourselves, right? I very much remember those scenes. I very much remember those times when we had a baby in the house for the first time and all the chaos and all the people coming in and out and all the trying to be helpful, but we just want to sleep. We just want to be alone. And the baby's crying sometimes, just want a little bit of peace and quiet. And then those perfect moments where oftentimes we are all laying together in bed, waking up at the same time and just being together calmly, peacefully. And of course, it can't always be that way, but those moments are so precious, especially in the middle of all that chaos. But that's the question, once again. Can you balance the chaos with the peace? And I think that is where Carmy needs to get to. Oh, and as a counterpoint to all of this, I completely forgot to mention that, of course, at the end of episode 5, I believe it was, Sydney's father, played by the wonderful Robert Townsend, has had a heart attack. And of course, this is very traumatic to Sydney, who already grew up without a mother and now terrified of losing her father as well. And again, if we want the counterpoint this season to previous seasons, we have last season where as Sugar is having the baby, no one can be reached. She has to end up going to Dee Dee, the last person she wants to talk to, because everybody's turned their phones off, because it's the policy of being strictly, when you're at the bear, you have to be 100% committed to the bear. And suddenly it's like, I'll drive you to the hospital. Don't worry about it. Let's check in on her. This new philosophy where your personal well-being is more important than what's happening in the restaurant. Really a very different tone from last season. And of course, all of this culminates in episode 7. Over an hour long, just like the previous time they ever had a 1 hour plus episode of this show, was fishes. And now it's bears. Bears eat fishes, by the way, so maybe there's something there. But in season 2, where Dee Dee is trying to make the 7 fishes and having a nervous breakdown, and everybody's at each other's throats. And in flashback, we see that Mikey and Uncle Lee were throwing forks at each other, and Dee Dee eventually drives a car through the house. As if you could have a more profound counterpoint to that episode of TV, we have this year's Bears. Everyone is dreading. What is it going to be like for all these people to be together? Tiffany, Richie's ex-wife, is remarrying. And throughout the season, there's been this contention that he doesn't like the way that she's being spoiled by the new stepdad, Frank, played by Josh Hartnett. And in every possible way, this is the opposite from the chaotic episode Fishes, where rather than raging out, rather than bottling things up, everybody just talks. And we find out these things. For example, Lee and Mikey became friends after that horrible blow-up. They bonded and talked about Carmy. We see that both the Richie and the stepdad have these feelings of inadequacy around sharing fatherhood with the young daughter. We even finally meet Francie, who Sugar has had this antagonistic relationship with for years now and refuses to ever patch things up. And we find out it is Brie Larson, of all people, another very starry guest appearance here. You know, of course, you knew it was going to be someone big when they were hiding it for so long. But even they make amends and talk things out. And it even turns out that there might have been a sexual relationship between the two of them, which might have been the cause of their rift. And of course, this whole entire episode culminates with, one by one, all of the bears going into this little cave, metaphorically, under this table, where Eva, the daughter, has hidden because she's embarrassed to dance. She doesn't want to dance in public. And Claire, who had been so nice and supportive of Sydney, and once again, she's reflecting her decency as a person, is here. And once again, Carmy might not have gotten on that table if he knew she was going to be there, but one by one, they are all under there. And this is the bears. These are the bears. They're not only the Berzatto family, they're this extended family. They are the cousins. The ex-wife is still a Berzato, even though she's not married into the family. She's only married in tenuously anyway to the family to start with. And John Mulaney, who married in as well. But the facts are there, of course, and even some of the staff from the restaurant. And Claire has this idea to have everybody go around and say what they're afraid of most. And some people have quick answers, some people have deeper answers, but it is very telling that Carmy tries to avoid the answer multiple times, only to say, what is the opposite of chaos? This is a theme, central theme of the whole entire show, by the way, of Carmy's trajectory here throughout this show. What is the opposite of chaos? And Claire says, peace. And then he says, oh, it's math. That's my biggest fear. But of course we know that actually his biggest fear is that he, minus the chaos, will not be as good. Just a little bit of trivia here, by the way. Emmylou Harris is performing Tougher Than the Rest, a Bruce Springsteen song, during this sequence, when the dancing sequence finally, when everybody dances. Even Eva gets on the dance floor finally. And of course, that's a Bruce Springsteen song. One of my favorites, by the way. And of course, Jeremy Allen White is going to play Springsteen in his upcoming biopic, I think coming this Christmas. So is that an Easter egg? I'm not sure. But more importantly, this is really the culmination point of the whole entire season, of the whole entire show up until this point, is this trajectory from chaos to peace, and from screaming and talking past each other to just telling everybody what's going on and how that's how you solve problems. That's how these people heal themselves. And as long as you can be vulnerable without being attacked, they'll always come together. Not just the family, but the extended family. Oh, I forgot to mention, of course, Dee Dee is here as well. And rather than driving a car through the door, she is now talking things out, trying to be rational. She's still emotional. She knows she's not 100% right. But most importantly, is she stopped drinking. She's been a year clean. And that's very important as well. So healing is still possible at any age. We can all want to be better versions of ourselves. Episode 8 is called Green, and this is a reference to Claire mentioning that she had left her favorite sweatshirt, green sweatshirt, at the Berzato home. And this is a motivator to get Carmy to go back to see his mother. Has not been there in years, not since the events of Fishes. He also has some pictures that he had found that she really desperately wanted to see. And he thinks this is going to be a disaster. But no. Episode 8 is, in a way, maybe the most filler episode we've ever had. Everybody moves their ball a little further forward. We're seeing that Tina can finally make the dish on time. Will Poulter here is their stage playing Chef Luca. Forgot to mention him back here for multiple episodes for this season. And this episode is a lot of connective tissue. It's kind of just bringing in the character development, tying things up in a nice little bow, maybe a little too conveniently. And of course, is the setup for the important next episode, the reconciliation between Carmy and his mother. The 9th episode is called Tornado. And this is a sauce that Dee Dee remembers eating when she was on a trip to Italy. One of the pictures that he has brought back with him. And not only is this something that connects her to her heritage and to her pride of her family, it, of course, once again allows Carmy to feed her, to cook for her. Not the way that she was making that fish, trying to feed the whole entire family. He's like, no, I'm going to cook for you and you're going to accept it. And she does. And of course, he makes this sauce. For the first time, probably her having this recipe since this fond memory she has from when she was younger. And again, this idea that food can heal. This is very touching. This mother and son, and maybe Carmy seeing a reflection of himself in his mother. Not only that she brings chaos around her, but that chaos is grounded in some level of insecurity and fear of being left behind by her family. But also just seeing these photos of the places she traveled to when she was with his dad, when they were still happy together. Although I guess she was sightseeing on her own, so maybe even then they had problems. But she had a life, a long life before they were around. And he maybe is seeing that he has pigeonholed his experiences so much to be great at this thing. But to what end if he has no life outside of it? And he painfully returns to his childhood bedroom, but he also finds Claire's green sweater, or sweatshirt, I should say. Okay, a couple of important details that I don't remember where exactly they happen. Well, one of them I definitely do know, but maybe this is the sand between the planets. I forgot to mention this. I don't know how I forgot to mention this. Such an important moment in the show. Of course, we had Richie praying, first time we'd ever seen him pray, I believe, that the restaurant remained operational because it's the only thing that connects him to people anymore. So really at a low point. And then telling this story, a story about William Friedkin, by the way, seeing a Japanese Zen garden and how the sand is connecting all these rocks. And he understood it wasn't the empty space, that the empty space represented something. And that Richie understood that he is the connective force. He's the thing that he doesn't have to be one of the rocks. He doesn't have to be the biggest rock. He doesn't have to be the object that draws the eye. He's the thing that binds them all together. In the way that the culture of a neighborhood, by the way, defines what a neighborhood is. And that could be the food, that can be the art. Of course, the culture itself is the thing that defines the culture of a neighborhood and binds those people together. It's what makes them have a common ground. And then we come to episode 10, an episode called Goodbye. And basically the entirety of this episode is after hours. We are ticking down to the final hours of the restaurant itself, but it's actually not the case. In an earlier episode, we had found out that they've continued to bend that curve and the business is profitable. But the computer says, okay, so now you are profitable. The buffer of money that kept you afloat is now zeroed out, and you can just sell the business now and just walk away and put a little bit of money in your pocket, or you can just live off of what you're making every single week, which basically pays your bills, and that's it. And there's very limited upside. There's some upside, but it's pretty limited. So why would you keep doing this? And of course, the show tells us, we see Sugar look at this board of all of the employees there. This family, not only explicitly the family, but this family of workers, this extended family, that's the reason to keep doing this and what it represents. And as that clock is ticking down, there is this conversation. Unspoken this whole entire time was that Sydney obviously had been having this communication with Shapiro, had considered it, and through the grapevine or through Shapiro himself, Carmy knew about this. But here's the big shock reveal. It happens in episode 9, I believe. He has removed himself from the partner agreement. So Jimmy's a part owner, Sugar's a part owner, and Sydney's a part owner. And he is no longer on the partner agreement. He wants to walk away from the restaurant, but he wants to walk away from the whole thing. This thing that he's excelled at, this thing that he's been extraordinary at, and he wants to walk away. And there is just this argument about, an open argument about what this represents. Is he abandoning them? And he's like, no, I'm going to stick around until this is working, until you guys are profitable. I commit to that, but I don't own this. It's yours. I walk away at the end of this. And she's like, are you just going to go work at some other restaurant? And he's like, no, I walk away from all of it, which is shocking to think that someone would excel at something and then just give it up. We feel that way. But he says, I don't know who I am as a person. Richie intervenes at one point in the conversation, and it starts all over again. The contentiousness, you're abandoning us. You created all this chaos. You refuse to settle down the menu. And he's like, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to tell you, I need to walk away from this thing to make it work. I shut my mouth for this entire season of show. I walked away. I let you guys make the decisions. And you guys got better. You guys got faster. You guys simplified the menu. You guys made the decisions that made this business thrive. What am I doing here? And it's a really good point. But it is tragic to think that this is his vision. This was his dream. And he abandons it here as they finally achieve some success. And as the season and the episode concludes, Sydney says, I agree to the partnership. She had already kind of done this already. It's kind of incredible when you think about the fact that this business was probably going to go under. Even weeks ago, they were already considering this. And she turned down the offer from Shapiro. So you can understand Shapiro being really annoyed with her because it's just like, so you're rejecting my offer to hang out with these people until the business goes bankrupt in a couple of weeks. Of course, it turned out it wasn't the case. But you can understand his frustration with her, especially with her being so wishy-washy on every decision. But in this decision, she's not wishy-washy. She says, I will sign that partnership agreement as long as Richie is a partner as well. And he's like, hell yeah, sign me up. He is the sand between the stones. And the clock ticks down to 0. Goodbye. Okay, here's criticism and some analysis of things here. At the best, I loved this idea of being able to heal these wounds. I mean, I think we all carry these animosities, familial traumas in our past that we refuse to deal with. So there is this beautiful idea of just making something, of just getting these people in a room and doing something incredibly complicated, something incredibly complex, and to execute at such a level that not only do you create an experience for someone else, but that you simultaneously heal your own wounds. And then that pays back in a way into those toxic relationships, fixing those as well, or at least improving them. And honestly, all of this is fixed in the context of the show, I should say. All this is fixed by simply addressing it directly rather than hiding from it. Now, what's so strange is last year that they had pitched this season, this fourth season, as being the final season of the show, which in retrospect now makes absolutely no sense at all. You think about where this show ends, and not only is it obvious that the show could go on, right? Obviously, it also doesn't seem to officially end this show. It leaves things kind of refreshingly, excitingly in this idea that this buffer of cash has run out. So now they simply need to live day to day. They need to live every day and make the best product they can at the best price they can and provide the best experience and simply earn the money to keep operating the business for as long as they choose to do so. So in some ways, it's not that the bear ends, it's that a new part, a new version of the bear emerges. But just in practical ways, this obviously is not the end of the show. You leave so many things dangling. Is Carmy, for example, you could easily see Carmy trying to mend things with Claire, developing that relationship. And then what does he do? Does he help the bear get back on his feet? Does he end up working at, I didn't even mention this, but there's like a big subplot in this whole entire season that Ibrahim wants to create an opportunity. And of course, the sandwich shop, the beef, is still incredibly profitable, even as they have now made the operation of the business only 2 hours a day. They are still making 75% of the profits they were making before. Their margins are much higher than before because they have such a limited staff in such a small period of time, to the point where Rob Reiner, in the guest performance here, shows up as this consultant who's saying, you guys need to franchise. So this is literally just left open at the end where they're agreeing to franchise. I just have to run it by Carmy. That conversation never even happens. That's like literally dangling for next season. And having Luca come back as the stage, you can imagine that there will be a spin-off of The Bear where you see he is now running back of the house with Sid. And you can see Ibrahim and the sandwich shop could be another spin-off of the show as well, as they try to franchise and make money that way as well. And then, maybe Carmy is so busy, the actor is so busy, Jeremy Allen White that is, that maybe he does come back at the end of next season just for a few episodes. And maybe he finds his joy in working in the sandwich shop, just like his brother and the community that built around that sandwich shop back in the day. So it is pretty clear that they want to have those dangling threads to develop those possibilities. So Hulu is not closing the door on more seasons of The Bear. And some of that, like franchise service, rubs me the wrong way when you consider kind of how pure some of what happens in this season of the show. But that's the reality. But that's where I don't even ding the show for making some of those compromises, because that is once again what the show is about. The show is about what happens when you create a product and now you have to keep making that product, whether you want to or not. You have an audience now. You have a producer that you need to pay back for their investment. They supported you. They invested in you. They believed in you. You succeeded. And now you got to pay them back. And you're no longer the owner of this thing, which to start with, it was your idea, but it still took hundreds of people to get this thing off the ground. This is the show I'm talking about now. In the restaurant, dozens of people to get this off the ground, including Jimmy, risking all this money with the family just because he loved them. And that's like producing a show too, right? These rich people who have the money to produce these shows, these studios, and their producers, they're picking you. They're saying, I believe in your idea. I could have picked a different idea. I could play it safe and just make another reality show. But no, I'm going to risk it on this particular product. And then it succeeds. And then you have to be appreciative because they invested in you. But now you just have to keep making it year after year. So in a way, I almost read this as Christopher Storer is saying, I leave the bear. Maybe that is what we're actually going to see. Maybe there will be more bear or spin-offs of these characters with these characters. But maybe Christopher Storer, the creator of the show, like Carmy, is walking away. I personally would love to see a season that was more final, like I just outlined there. We see all these plot threads can be developed, and spending time with these characters is always entertaining. I do want to shout out the fact that I was a little annoyed last year with them using the facts so many times, just throwing them in there over and over again for comic relief. And I got to tell you that they got the blend right this season where the facts were not around for like the first 4 or 5 episodes probably. And I'm like, where are they? I guess they've just decided to get rid of them because of the criticism last year. But no, they're like very heavily involved in those later episodes. And they're so funny when they're on screen. So I think that, again, they reacted to their criticism and got the mix right. So again, the value of criticism perhaps, but I do feel like they were some of the highlights, some of the comedic highlights of the season for sure, with the facts and the characters, honestly, that I was a little tired of last season. So I think I'm right at the hour marker. So this is usually when I start to run out of things to say. Even I run out of things to say after an hour. I look forward to hearing any of your feedback. And of course, most importantly, for me anyway, I cannot wait to hear Sona and Darren's responses to this season, as well as all of you out there. I can imagine very clearly that people having a very negative take on this season, but let me know. Email me, needssomeintroduction@gmail.com, or post comments on our YouTube or Spotify episodes. I promise I'll reply. I always do. Eventually, it might be a couple weeks later, but I'll definitely get back to you. And of course, stay tuned for those follow-up conversations later this week. Also, full coverage of the Apple TV thriller Smoke. And who knows, a review of F1. Definitely a conversation with Celia, my sister, about Squid Game next week. Expect that episode. And a couple weeks, and then next week after that, Sona and I will start covering the new Dexter sequel series week to week. Very skeptical about that one, but a very entertaining trailer, I have to say. Very entertaining trailer for that set in New York. So it could be good, could be interesting at least. Stay tuned for all of that, and I'll talk to you soon.